You know, for decades, we've been fed this narrative that success is all about being a lone wolf, that growth is this solo mission you just have to grind through entirely alone. But actually, scratch that. The science of intentional well-being reveals a completely different reality. Human connection, it's not just some nice-to-have bonus. It is a literal, vital biological requirement if you want to navigate uncertainty and actually hit peak performance. So let's dive right into this explainer and look at the actual biology behind all of this.
James Cone, a researcher out at the University of Virginia, really hits the nail on the head here. He points out that our brains just absolutely expect not to be alone. And when we are alone, our brain is literally forced to work with fewer resources. We are a deeply social species, and our brains just aren't wired for solitude, especially when we're facing uncertainty. Think about it. When you're totally isolated during a complex transition, your brain has to process all that ambiguity entirely by itself. And that carries a massive, massive energetic cost. It's exhausting. But here's the good news. There's actually a biological hack for this.
And that brings us to something called social baseline theory, and this really crucial concept of a secure base. Basically, this is a person or maybe a relational system that you perceive as totally available, responsive, and reliable. And what researchers found is wild. Having this secure base literally reduces the biological cost of sitting with uncertainty. Now, obviously, quality relationships don't just magically erase your problems, but what they do is free up your cognitive resources. So instead of burning all your energy just managing the baseline stress of being alone, you suddenly gain this massive capacity to take risks and tolerate ambiguity. It's like a weight is lifted.
So what does this actually look like in everyday life? Well, it involves mapping out your own personal safe base network across 4 key areas. We're talking work, personal life, growth and development, and your body and health. I want you to ask yourself right now, is there at least one person in every single one of those 4 quadrants where you can be just 100% authentic? You know, someone you can look at and just say, I have no idea what I'm doing without any fear of losing credibility. Because having this network mapped out, well, it leads to significantly higher resilience and way more innovation when a crisis hits. Okay, so secure bases are obviously vital, but sociological research from Stanford reveals something super counterintuitive about what they call weak ties. Now, strong ties, like our really close friends, they're great, but they usually share our exact same network, the exact same information, and the same points of view. Weak ties, on the other hand, so people who are more like acquaintances, they actually connect us to entirely different networks. It's fascinating. During major transitions, it's actually these weak ties that are way more likely to introduce us to fresh perspectives and completely new opportunities. Now, we've all heard of the classic fight or flight stress response, right? Well, researchers out of UCLA documented this totally fascinating alternative, and they call it tend and befriend. Turns out, under stress, our biology can actually prompt us to actively seek connection and care for other people. And honestly, the best part? It's a built-in biological hack. When you care for someone else during a highly stressful time, your body pumps out oxytocin, and that drastically reduces the stress response, not just for the person you're helping, but for you as well. It's a total win-win.
And you know, this whole biological reality, it scales directly right up into team environments. When we look at research on psychological safety, it shows over and over that teams who feel free to openly express their doubts systematically outperform individual experts. Why is that? Well, it's because a true diversity of perspectives is the fuel for collective intelligence. Often the biggest roadblock here is this sort of unwritten rule that leaders must never, ever look uncertain. But here's the truth. Acknowledging uncertainty is absolutely not a weakness. In fact, it's the exact trigger needed to activate a group to find brilliant solutions that no single person could ever figure out on their own. So how does all this affect our actual day-to-day capacity to get things done? Well, we traditionally think about having 4 fundamental energies, right? Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. But meaningful relationships actually bring in a 5th dimension, relational energy. Physically speaking, connection literally lowers your cortisol levels. Emotionally, it provides something called co-regulation. Basically, this means you get to borrow another person's calm, whereas isolation just traps your nervous system in this state of prolonged alertness. And mentally, it keeps us from getting stuck in those endless solitary thought loops. Human connection literally fuels your entire biological system. All right, so how do we go about actively building this into our lives? It really comes down to 4 very actionable pillars of relational happiness. First up is what we call plus being. That's about practicing genuine, true presence with people even when you don't have all the answers.
Next is plus us, which is intentionally building out both those strong and weak networks we just talked about. Then, and this is absolutely crucial, there is plus discipline. You have to cultivate relationships way before you actively need them. It's about making small, regular investments of your time. And finally, plus positive chemistry. Just remembering that social support naturally floods your system with oxytocin, which puts the brakes right on your body's stress response.
All of this really brings us to our biggest takeaway from this explainer. Connection is the ultimate resource that makes it possible to navigate when you completely lose the map. You have to build it before you need it. Because the relational fabric of your life, it's not going to be built in a sudden moment of crisis. No, it's woven together in the quiet, disciplined little moments of everyday life. So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. Who can you do something really small for this week? Send a quick message, offer a hand, just without expecting anything at all in return. Go ahead and reach out. Start building your map today.